Louise Pommery inherited a partnership in her husband's champagne company in the 1860s upon his death, and turned out to be one heck of an extraordinary businesswoman. Her husband's partner was soon impressed with her excellent business acumen that he gave her the entire champagne house to run. In 1870, the Franco-Prussian War began, initiated by France, and in the end, France lost badly and 30,000 Prussian troops occupied all of Champagne. They stayed in France to make sure the French government honored the peace treaty that gave them Alsace-Lorraine and paid their war reparations bill. France was close to being bankrupt. The Champagne region was not in good condition. Millions of bottles had been looted by soldiers again, and transportation was really slowed. But despite this terrible economic time, Louise Pommery chose to try to make a new champagne that had not been done before. She wanted to make history, and she sure did. Her experiment was quite risky and involved greater costs, but with capitalism, greater risk has potential for greater reward. After experimenting for a few years, Louise Pommery successfully blew the market away in 1874 with her new champagne. She transformed the entire champagne industry permanently for the better. Hats off to another fantastic champagne lady.
This is Monsieur Terry Gasco, and he is the chef de cave. And in addition, he holds a very esteemed position in France. He's been elected by his peers to be the president of the Enologists Union of all of France, which is all of the winemakers. So we're delighted to be here with you today and talk more about Champagne Pommery. And in particular, I'm really excited to be here because of Louise Pommery. She was such a unique and wonderful woman. Can you tell us about her and how she became head of this champagne house?
Of course. And when Madame Pommery came at the head of the house of Pommery, the house was a very little house with only 20,000 bottles. And when she died, some 45 years later, the Pommery house was selling about 2 million bottles.
Wow, so from 20,000 to 2 million bottles
yes,
in her lifetime. That's incredible.
Very incredible, and Pommery was the most important house of Champagne at the end of the 19th century.
How old was Widow Pommery when she took over?
She was very young. She was with only 39 years old, so it was a young widow.
One of the first things Louise Pommery did is she excavated more. Can you talk about your cellars?
We have 18 kilometers of galleries, 80 kilometers where we can put bottles of champagne. That to say, we have more than 20 million bottles of champagne into the cellar. We have
20 million bottles.
We have some bottles here, but we have 20 million bottles into the cellar.
Stored, okay.
So it's very interesting to visit our cellar in terms of volume of cellars. But it's very interesting because since Madame Pommery, we have art inside the cellar. Mrs. Pommery made a lot of bas-relief.
Yes, okay?
Bas-relief. Where you can see into the cellar four bas-reliefs made by Madame Pommery. I can speak about all the style of Pommery, but I can tell you that Madame Pommery wanted to make a new champagne. In the spirit of Pommery, we have a good word that is innovation. And Madame Pommery wanted to make some innovation about champagne, and the best word is the Brut champagne. She made a Brut champagne in 1874. To say is a long time ago, and this champagne was very special because during this time the champagne was with a lot of sugar, a big quantity of sugar, and Madame Pommery made a new champagne because the selling manager was in England. and he was telling her the English people want a new product without sugar. So the cellar master made a new champagne without added sugar inside. It was the first champagne for over the world in Brut, and now 98% of champagne are Brut champagne.
The bottom line is this: a wine that is dry pairs well with many foods. In contrast, the other wines of the 19th century had on average 250 grams of sugar per bottle, making them very sweet. They went best primarily with desserts. Other champagne makers debated about trying to make a dry champagne, but chose not to because of the costs and risks involved. It was not only a matter of reducing the amount of sugar added, but rather, better grapes had to be used, picked at the height of maturity, and this is not easy due to the cool, rainy climate of the Champagne region. Louise Pommery astutely made a deal with the grape growers that she would absorb any of their financial losses that might occur if they picked later when she said to. As a result of picking later, sugars and syrups were no longer needed to negate the high acidity that resulted from using unripened grapes. Her 1874 Brut champagne successfully filled a void the market had been asking for. Louise permanently altered the entire champagne industry for the better. A remarkable lady indeed.
The cuvée Louise Pommery, for me, it's a very, very special product because, like you know, it's a prestige cuvée. And I want to put in this wine all the philosophy of Madame Pommery in terms of elegancy, in terms of freshness, in terms of all that you can find in finesse in a champagne. So in order to do that, I must find the best grapes in only 3 vineyards, parts of the vineyard, in 3 villages of Champagne. The 2 in Chardonnay, Avis and Cramant, it's 2 villages in the Côte des Blancs of Champagne, and another one of Haï for the Pinot Noir. So I am looking for the best plots in these 3 parts, and after that we cut only the best grapes in these 3 plots, and after that we make a special press in order to have the best juice, the most purity possible in terms of juice. Okay, so it's a very, very long way in order to do a cuvée Louise Pommery, and the blend begin in the vineyard. After that we have the blend in the winery, but in terms of philosophy, we make the blend first into the vineyard. So it's not only the work of one man; it's the work of a lot of growers. In order to do that, it's in respect for Madame Pommery. So, cuvée Louise Pommery, 1998. Okay. Sorry, I must test before, in order to see if we don't have some corky aromas. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Madame Pommery.
Yes, Madame Pommery.
And for you.
And for you. Thank you.
Like you can see, you have a very, very pulp champagne. That to say that you have a good quantity of Chardonnay inside, but you can see too that you have very, very little bubbles, a big quantity of bubbles, very, very little. So you have a very good and very fine, very precious aromas.
It's delicious.
I like it.
I like it too.
important to, when you test the champagne, is the same thing when you test the champagne, when you test another wine. You must, of course, see the product in order to understand the color, to see if you had a good way of elaboration in terms of brilliancy, in terms of brilliancy. Of course, for champagne, it's important to see the bubbles. And after that, you must test by the nose in order to understand the wine. When you smell it, you smell some fresh aromas with some mineral aromas, and the mineral aromas come from the chalk.
The chalk in the soil.
You have some flowers aromas that the Chardonnay gives you these flowers aromas. It's the little flowers aromas, and after that you have some aromas of white fruits. Okay, like for example, like peach aromas, pear aromas. Okay,
peach and pear.
Peach and pear. Okay, so all these things. When you smell the cuvée Louise Pommery now, you smell all this type of aroma, and more you are smelling, more you want to drink it.
Right, that's true.
Okay?
Very true.
You are sure? Okay, so you smell it one time, you understand the wine. Another time to understand more, and as I said. Third time, I think that you want to drink it.
You have to taste.
So you test it after that. And you test it. When you test it, you put a lot of oxygen into your mouth in order to develop all the aromas that you have smelled. Okay, if you remember, we have spoken about the sugar. If I put more sugar inside, you don't smell that. You smell the sugar, but you don't smell all the finesse and all the generosity of the champagne, all the complexity in terms of aromas of the champagne. So you have seen, you have three parts of the taste: the eye, the nose, and the mouth.
Wonderful.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. This is Boris Franek. He is a professional guide here at Champagne Pommery, and he's going to tell us about this splendid cask.
So this cask has been realized at the beginning of the 20th century. This cask was used to blend our champagne. So this cask can contain 100,000 liters of wine, so 75,000 bottles. And we have sent this cask in the United States at the beginning of the 20th century, so in 1913, in St. Louis, for the Universal Exposition. And for this occasion, we have asked Mr. Émile Gallet, a famous artist, which was making Art Nouveau, to create those sculptures symbolizing the friendship between France and the United States. So on the bottom of those casks, we have symbolized Reims, so the place where champagne is born, with the Cathedral of Reims, the Champagne vineyard, and here we have the symbol of France, and this woman which is offering a glass of champagne to America, which is symbolized by this actress, this beautiful woman, and this sphinx with an Indian head. And this glass and this straw was very typical. At the beginning of the 20th century, and for French people, Americans were drinking everything with a straw.
True.
And at the top of this cask, we have the arrival of this cask in the United States. So it was sent to New York before being sent to St. Louis, Missouri. So we have the boat here, which is transporting this cask. It has been rebuilt in St. Louis. And we have also the Statue of Liberty, which is a huge symbol for French people.
In
it's
America.
Really,
yes,
the most important symbol.
That's
in
right.
America.
It was a gift from France to the United States.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Lady Pommery, when she created this estate, she created it to create herself a champagne, but also to promote a champagne. And she was the first to open her cellars to visitors, so to English tourists first. They were attracted by the buildings at the surface, and to her customers. And that's why she wanted to impress her visitors with her cellars. And she has ordered 4 carlings made by Mr. Navelet between 1882 and 1886. And here we have this first carling, which is welcoming the visitors and also symbolizing the Champagne vineyard. So here we are in the first crayère of our cellars. Crayère means chalk pit, and they have been made by the Romans 2,000 years ago. So the Romans, which were occupying the region, needed this chalk in order to build the buildings in Reims or to create the roads binding Reims to Paris. So they have dug such crayères and they have abandoned them. And when Lady Pommery bought her estate in 1868, she rediscovered 120 crayères like this one. So her first task was to level all those crayères at the same depths. So some of them were only 10 meters deep, others were 60 meters deep. And during some years, she has brought all those crayères at the same depth, so 30 meters under the surface. And then she has dug all those tunnels and to bind the crayères together. That's why we have here 18 kilometers of cellars. And this depth of 30 meters has been chosen to bring the perfect and fresh temperature in our cellars of 10 degrees Celsius, because the chalk is absorbing the wetness at the surface and it's giving back in our cellars. So here with this chalk and the 30 meters of depth, we have 85% of wetness, so 10 degrees Celsius. So here we have the traditional champagne bottle, the champenoise, with 0.75 liter. Here we have the Magnum, 1.5 liter, and that's the best bottle to keep a champagne the longest. Then you have the Jeroboam, 3 liters, and that's the bottle we are using after a Grand Prix.
Okay.
Then you have the Mathusalem, 6 liters, and the Salmanazar, 9 liters, 80 glasses, 18 kilos. And that's the biggest bottle we are producing here at Pommery.
Fantastic.
Indeed. So this calling is symbolizing Bacchus, god of the wine, god of the pleasure for the Greek and for the Romans, and his spiritual father, Silene. And Silene is the satyr, which is helping Bacchus when this one is drunk. So, of course, this calling is symbolizing the spirit of champagne, so wine for the pleasure. So this last calling here is showing us that during the 18th century, we were drinking champagne with a dessert, with something sweet. Because the wine growers were using very bad grapes, very acid grapes to create their champagne, and they were keeping the bottles only 3 months in the cellars. So it wasn't giving any maturation process, so no qualities, no aromas. And to hide the defaults of those champagnes, and the high acidity, the lack of aromas, they were adding 100 grams of sugar per bottle. So obviously such a sweet champagne was only drinkable with a dessert. But Lady Pommery wanted to create a fine and delicate champagne and to sell it in England mostly. So she has invented quality rules about the harvest, about the blendings, and about the maturation process. And because of those rules, in 1874, she released the first Brut champagne ever made, called the Pommery Nature, and this champagne was a revolution, because then champagne had the quality, and she has really invented the quality rules of this traditional champagne method. And today, 95% of the champagne drunk in the world are Brut champagnes. So here we have our Grand Vintage Reserve, so a collection of all the vintages we've got during the 19th and the 20th century. So this reserve is there for Mr. Thierry Gascot, our cellar master and our wine experts. And the most precious bottle of this reserve is just there, here.
This bottle of 1874 is the only bottle we have of this famous Pommery Nature, so the first Brut champagne ever made and created by Lady Pommery.
In 1914, France and Germany declared war on one another yet again. The Germans soon began shelling the magnificent Cathedral of Reims, and within one day, it was destroyed. Priests tried to stop the bombing by hanging a Red Cross flag from the towers, but to no avail. Because it was the site where the French kings and queens had been crowned for centuries, the Germans believed it would destroy France's morale by destroying it. By the end of World War I, 98% of the city would be destroyed. In 1915, on average, 1,500 German bombs a day fell on Reims. This horrible bombardment forced 20,000 of its citizens underground into the large cellars of the champagne houses for protection. Most champagne firms suffered devastating damage from the shelling and moved their business operations underground as well. They sent champagne regularly to the French troops to boost morale and also for the sick and wounded. Champagne had come to represent France's will to survive. Winston Churchill also used it to rally his fellow soldiers, saying, "Remember, gentlemen, it's not just France we're fighting for, it's for Champagne." Some of the fiercest fighting of World War I took place in the Champagne region. The vineyards were left in a horrific state due to the trenches, bomb holes, shrapnel, ugly rings of barbed wire, and unexploded shells that leaked poisons into the soil. But the people of Champagne did not give up during the war. They went on with the harvest, though it was deadly. Many women, children, older men, and some soldiers who helped pick the grapes lost their lives in the fields from German bombs. The 1916 harvest was done mostly at night with workers wearing gas masks to try to avoid the outlawed poisonous gas the Germans were using. To say it was extremely dangerous is an understatement. Americans arrived in France in 1917 to help defeat the Germans. Thanks to the help of the American doughboys, on November 11, 1918, Germany surrendered and signed the peace treaty with France. 13 million had died in the war, and the Champagne region had lost half its population, and 40% of its vineyards were in ruin. After World War I ended in 1918, the good times would begin. The Roaring Twenties, or Crazy Years as they are called in France, started off energetically with the fabulous jazz that was imported to France by American soldiers. Josephine Baker, a St. Louis native, enthralled the French with her unique jazz revue at a club on the Champs-Élysées. Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, along with other American artists and writers, became a big part of the Roaring Twenties in Paris too. But the fun would end quickly. American Prohibition abruptly halted the good times. In 1920, Congress voted to make the United States officially dry, without any alcohol. Less than 2 years after the war ended, the champagne makers were hit with yet another overwhelming obstacle. This dry law lasted 14 long years until 1933. The 18th Amendment had banned the sale and manufacture of liquor in the states. Champagne could no longer be shipped to the American market during this time, by legal means that is. During Prohibition, some champagne houses hired smugglers to assist them, and business then increased dramatically. 71 million bottles reached the States during the dry years. Can't blame Americans for continuing to want their wine. Just imagine making wedding toast with unfermented grape juice in a champagne glass. I am very glad I wasn't around for that. Prohibition eventually ended because one small sip of wine made perfectly good citizens into criminals, because technically, they had broken the law. Additionally, organized crime grew greatly during Prohibition, and their gang wars resulted in more lawlessness. Though bathtub gin was popular, Al Capone was a great fan of champagne. We know this because the FBI eventually discovered he was placing very large orders through a Chicago agent for Pommery champagne. Following the Wall Street crash of 1929 was the Great World Depression of the 1930s. It severely affected many champagne houses. Sadly, some went bankrupt and never reopened, and others were sold cheaply. But, once again, the Champenois kept moving forward as best as possible.